Family dynamics, family relationships, boundaries, honoring yourself, navigating this healing journey, it can all feel so conflicting and convoluted at times. If you can relate, welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I want to talk about, kind of briefly, just the idea of how overwhelming it can sometimes be to try to navigate this part of life and the healing journey. Family relationships are challenging for most people for a variety of reasons, and of course the degree of challenge can vary significantly. But inevitably, I don't know that there's anybody that I've ever known over the years that hasn't struggled in some way with family relationships, the dynamics, the boundaries, the struggles, something. And there can be any number of reasons for that. And if the person who traumatized you, who abused you, who hurt you, is within that family dynamic, then it creates even more challenges. So I think it can be helpful just to really recognize that it is a problem, a challenge, a struggle, an issue that most people have. Learning to really navigate those relationships is also a struggle that most people have, because family relationships, we are taught culturally that they're the most important relationships, that we have an obligation to those family relationships, especially our parents. Like, people will hear all the time, well, she's your mother. You have to have a relationship with her. How could you do this to your father after everything he's done for you? They're your family. How could you do this? And it's really unfortunate that people do that, because there are a lot of reasons why you might decide that there needs to be some really significant changes in the dynamics of the relationships that you have. Very valid, very real, and very healthy reasons that you might make those decisions. And I think that's a really important piece to let yourself take in. Healthy. So it's not just about what you want, don't want. It's about making a healthy choice. And sometimes what we think that we want, what we feel like we want, can actually be incredibly conflicting. And sometimes what we want is to feel loved and to not feel guilty. So that can drive us into staying, to continue to try in a relationship that is incredibly unhealthy. We try to avoid the guilt, the shame, the fear, so we can feel what we're used to feeling. It drives us in that direction. And because it feels better than this unknown over here, we can make ourselves believe that it is the right decision. But learning to understand what is healthy, and ultimately, and this is maybe more challenging, or certainly more challenging, and what you deserve in a relationship, that is a process. And as you heal, that shifts over time. What you're willing to tolerate, what you view as being healthy or not, and what you begin to believe that you are deserving of in a healthy relationship. And all of those factors play into the challenges involved. And I think it's important to know that making a decision to set really strong boundaries with somebody, or even choosing to not have a relationship with somebody, the likelihood of you having full and complete support around that from all the people that have been in your life is probably going to be zero. Because people have difficulty facing even their own reality in that. And I have seen that happen. Sometimes the people who are most adamant about you not setting a strong boundary are the people who in their own life wished that they would have or could now, but they can't for any number of their own reasons. And so to feel better, they try to make themselves believe by telling somebody else that it's the wrong decision. So waiting for everybody in your life to be on board with the decision, you'd likely be waiting a lifetime. And when you feel like the people that really matter in your life are not supportive of you or the decision, it makes it so much more challenging. But it doesn't make it the wrong decision. And the truth is that making a decision to set really strong boundaries with a family member, I guess I won't say that it's never going to be easy, because for some people, depending on what's happened up to that particular point, maybe it will feel much easier. But for most people, it is not going to be easy. It's going to be incredibly, incredibly challenging to set those boundaries, to enforce those boundaries. It truly is one of the most challenging things about this healing journey, because you don't have control over how somebody else is showing up. You can set the boundary. You can even feel relatively confident in the boundary that you're setting. But when somebody else dismisses it or degrades you for it, shames you for it, makes you feel guilty about it, all that confidence can go right out the window. But just because it's hard, just because the guilt is there, does not mean that it's wrong. And certainly just because somebody is not respecting the boundary doesn't mean it's wrong. Because in most unhealthy or dysfunctional relationship situations, if you try to set a boundary of any type, the other person is likely not going to be happy about it. And when they're not happy about it, they push back. And the more strongly you stand your ground, the more they're going to push back. They're going to bring out those big guns, so to speak. They're going to call you names. They're going to make you feel bad. They're going to remind you of what you're going to miss out on. They might even threaten you in some way. But that's their survival, trying to get you to keep things the way they've always been. It doesn't make you wrong in setting that boundary. And sometimes that boundary might be within yourself, where you just say to yourself, okay, I know that I tend to feel this incredible anxiety whenever I see a message come through from this person or from anybody in my family. So maybe part of that is that you just decide, okay, if I see a message come through, I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to respond to it until I've given myself, my nervous system, a little bit of time to calm down so that I can feel more grounded when I go in and read or respond. It could be something simple like that. It could be that that's part of it, and maybe there's something else as well. Maybe you set some parameters around what kinds of things you're willing to talk about, or what time of day you're willing to interact with this person. Thinking about your own self-care, like is later in the evening better for you? Or maybe later in the evening is worse for you, because then you're all stressed out and you can't sleep, and it creates all sorts of problems. Maybe earlier in the day is better. Or maybe later in the day, when all the stress of the day is kind of behind you, maybe you feel more grounded. So there's no right or wrong. It's just about being able to really notice what feels right, what feels healthy for you. And sometimes that's trial and error. In fact, oftentimes probably there's a lot of trial and error that goes into it. Sometimes you might try to set a boundary thinking, okay, I think this will be enough. and you realize it's not, and you need to set a stronger boundary. Sometimes you feel pretty confident in the boundary that you're setting, and it's a good boundary for you, for what you need, but maybe that person isn't respecting it. And so then you have to set a more, or like a stronger boundary. You need to back off a little bit further. And no, and this is hard, and I know that this is hard. I've worked with so many people over the years that have had to do this. There are times that not having a relationship with a person, or even maybe a few people, or an entire family system, there are times when you need to back away from that completely. And that is never an easy decision. There is so much that goes into the decision itself, but then on the other side of making that decision, there's so much doubt, there's so much guilt, there's so many times that you question whether you did the right thing, where you question even how horrible of a person you might be, because that's what society tells us. They're your mother, they're your father, they're your sibling, suggesting that because we have that blood connection, that somehow we should tolerate behavior that is hurtful, that is dismissive, that is unhealthy. And whether it's somebody in your family or a stranger that you've just met, nobody has to tolerate that type of behavior. Nobody has to tolerate being in a relationship with somebody who doesn't have the ability to show up with you in a healthy way. And I want to be clear, it doesn't mean that you need to give up on that relationship indefinitely. It may mean that, and there are some situations that is absolutely what is necessary. But I have also been able to see people go through this process where it can sometimes be temporary, whether that's no contact at all or boundaries that have been put in place, because the more healing you do, the more worthy you feel. When you feel worthy, you're grounded. When you trust in your worthiness, you are grounded. And so when you go into a situation with somebody, from that place of being grounded, you can speak up. You can refuse to respond to certain questions. You can say, you know what, I don't really want to talk about this. And if they continue, you will feel confident enough to walk away. And there are times, if that other person has some level of awareness, has some level of healthiness within them, or maybe even has done some of their own work, they will be able to meet you in that place. And if they're not, then that's an important thing for you to be able to think about, to take in, to help determine what your next steps are. But when we are confident in who we are, in what we believe is healthy, generally speaking, when we can trust in that, it causes us to show up differently in our lives. And when we show up differently, sometimes we don't have the ability to control it, but sometimes those people will be willing, not necessarily consciously even, but they will meet us. They will show up differently as well. And that is the nature of reality, that when one part of a system changes, the system itself changes. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be changes for the better, but it changes. And if it doesn't change for the better, you have more confirmation that the decision that you made really was the right decision. But I think it's really important, just like with any boundary, to really let yourself take in that it is really unlikely that if setting a really strong boundary with somebody is the healthy decision, that you're going to feel confident that it's a healthy decision. That's really likely not going to happen unless you've done a whole lot of healing and had some practice in setting boundaries. The reality is, no matter where you are in this healing journey, if you've not really done that yet, you're going to doubt it. You're going to question yourself. You're going to feel bad. You might even feel shame. There's going to be a lot that comes up for you, but it doesn't mean that you're wrong. And I think it is important when you are working on setting those boundaries with people that have played a really important role in your life, for good or for bad, or maybe a combination of both. We need support. We need the ability to land with somebody that can understand and support the decision and not tell you, why would you do such a thing? How could you do this to your mom? Why would you do this to your family? Because that is not helpful. I would love to hear from you. Can you relate? Have you tried to set boundaries? Have you been successful at setting boundaries? Share your thoughts, your experiences in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.